guys, this is Dipty and welcome to my channel Life Admin 365 and welcome to today's video. As the name suggests, today's video is all about tools of the trade with respect to meal prep. This video was supposed to be part of the mini meal prep series that I shared with you guys sometimes in March or April of this year. But unfortunately, this video did not get recorded and I've been pushing it since then, since March or April, and I've been trying to get this recorded. But this particular content has been pushed over and over behind. But today is a good day as any other day to get this recorded and share it with you guys. As the title suggests, this video is all about the tools of the trade. And with respect to meal prepping, it includes our cutting, dicing, blending, mixing, and all other small appliances, along with our beloved food prepping containers, our storage containers, as well as our pots and pans. So in this video, I'm going to share the tools that I use frequently in my kitchen for my meal prepping and everyday food prepping. This particular video is part one of the two-part series on tools of the trade. And in this part, I will be sharing with you the tools that I use regularly every single day, maybe more than twice a day in my kitchen for cutting, blending, grinding. So stay tuned for this particular part and let's get started. Let's begin with our cutting tools. These are the tools that literally make or break our meal prepping experience and the meal prepping itself. A dull knife not only ruins the produce that we are prepping, but also causes discomfort to our hands, especially because it puts pressure on our wrist. A sharp knife makes cutting, slicing, dicing much easier and quicker. I have three different types of knives in my kitchen. The first one is the chef's knife. This is the longer and a heavy duty knife. Its blade is about 8 to 10 inches long and is used for my most heavy duty chopping, cutting or dicing. The produce that we get in US is much bigger and on the larger side as compared to what we get in India. That is why I need a much stronger and heavy duty knife for processing veggies like onions, cabbage, cauliflower and potatoes. That is my heavy duty chef's knife. Then I also have a multi-purpose knife. This knife is also useful for cutting vegetables that I mentioned earlier, but it does not have as much strength as my chef's knife. So to make our cutting job easier, it's very important that we have a sharp knife, which means we need to regularly sharpen our knife. When and how to sharpen our knife, it all depends on what you're using your knife for. If you're using your knife for cutting meat and meat related products, then you will need more frequent sharpening, maybe every 6 to 9 months. In my household, the chef's knife is used for prepping veggies. So I sharpen it only once a year. Typically, I bring my knives to the farmer's market and I would get them sharpened from a knife sharpener using his sharpening wheel. But unfortunately, because of COVID, the farmer's markets have been closed and I haven't seen a knife sharpener in this past year and a half. So what I did was I went to IKEA and I got this knife sharpening tool that I've been using since this past year. I'm not an expert on it. It's a little bit challenging for me to keep the knife sharpened for a year, but I'm giving it my best. IKEA does have a small knife sharpening tool where you just insert your knife blade into the tool and pull it across a few times. The last 2 or 3 times I went to IKEA, I couldn't find it, and that's why I decided to buy this particular knife sharpener with the hopes that I would eventually get a hang of using this. Or even better, I'm hoping that, with this COVID situation becoming better, I can go back to my knife sharpening guy and get it sharpened from the farmer's market. I would recommend that you get your knife sharpened at least once a year if you're using it just for prepping the veggies, and if you're using it for veggies as well as for meats, then I would recommend that you sharpen your knives maybe 6 to 9 months just so that they remain sharp and are good and make your life much easier. Moving on to grinders, blenders, mixers, and food processor. First on my list is my favorite Rico grinder. I have this Rico multi-purpose grinder blender for over 16 or 17 years now. I was looking for something that would grind chutneys. There were several blenders that were available on the market, but I could never get them to give me the fine grind that I'm looking for in a chutney. I had mentioned that to my mother-in-law, and she was on the lookout for a multi-purpose blender mixer. As soon as she found, she got one for me and she sent it to me along with my husband, who would frequently visit India for his work-related stuff. He was a little bit hesitant to bring it because he was like, why do you need a blender? Aren't there ones available on the American market? And he just could not relate to why I needed an Indian blender or something that could give me a fine grind. In those days, you know, there was no magic bullet or something like that that could give fine chutney, and I was so looking for it. I did get it, and this has been with me for a long time. Depending on what I'm making, I will use these different jars that are here to make the chutneys that I've been talking about. In smaller quantities, I'll use this one. This is my most favorite jar, and this is the one that gets used the most. Then moving on to the blending jar. Before I had my Vitamix, this was the thing that I would use frequently for making gravies. At that time, I was not making in larger quantities, and so this would suffice. However, these days I use this particular one for making chutney in large quantities. Then I have this wider base jar, which is mostly used for grinding dry ingredients. So if you're a person like me who likes to eat a lot of chutneys, be it dry, the garlic coconut chutney, or be it the coconut green chutney, the chili chutney, or the pudina chutney, then I would strongly recommend that you have a blender that gives you that fine blend, or the chutney or the paste. Moving on to the next tool. This is one of the oldest food processor that I have. This was the first food processor that I got after I graduated from school. Earlier I was using blenders, and at that time I did not have my Rico multi-purpose blender, and I was on the lookout for a food processor because at that time I was in awe of food processors. It had these several different types of attachment that I could use in the food processor to get to perform different functions. Like this one is the shredding blade. So there was this shredding blade, there was a slicing blade, then you had the chopping blade as well, and as a result I purchased this. This has been one of the best investments that I made for my food processors. I use this food processor mainly for shredding. You've seen me use this food processor several times. I like to use it for shredding cabbage along with shredding veggies. I've also used it for shredding paneer. You know, I shred paneer for my paneer bhurji. I've also grated cheeses, both hard and soft, using the shredding blade. Hard cheeses are not a trouble to shred, but for soft cheeses, you know, sometimes it can clog the shredding openings or the shredding portions of this plate. So the trick for shredding soft cheeses like mozzarella cheese or cheddar cheese is to freeze them for about half an hour or 45 minutes before shredding. I use shredded mozzarella not just as a pizza topping, but also for preparing a bunch of different keto related meals such as keto dosas or keto waffles or keto pancakes. And I like to use shredded cheddar cheese for, you know, as a topping on burritos, tacos, those kind of things. I prefer to shred my own cheese. You've often seen me buy cheese blocks, you know, from Costco. I prefer to shred my own cheese because I think because when you buy store-bought shredded cheese, in most of the cases, not all, but in most of the cases, they have a lot of added additives like lactose and whatnot to prevent the cheese strings from sticking to each other. So I like to buy the whole cheese block, if it's cheddar or mozzarella, stick it in the freezer and then shred it. So now this begs the question, is a food processor necessary? It all depends on how much and what you're making. Shredding, grating, slicing, all of these things can be done using a box grater, and even slicing and dicing can be done on a cutting board and knife. So you absolutely don't need a food processor, but it's good to have one, especially if you're doing in larger quantities. Moving on to the next one. Next tool in line is this powerhouse tool. It's a handheld immersion blender or a stick blender, and I absolutely love it. I make purees on a larger quantities, especially my basic masala paste. So for that purposes, I love to have this handheld blender. I also use this Immersion Blender for coarse grinding of pav bhaji. We like pav bhaji to be a little bit on the liquidy side. So earlier what I would do is transfer half of the prepared pav bhaji into my food processor or my blender, blend it coarsely, and then add it back to my main container, and that would be a big hassle. Since I've found this Immersion Blender, or since I've decided to use this Immersion Blender, it has been a total game changer for me. As I was cleaning, my storage space, I found this and I said, you know what, I need to figure out how to use it so that, I can really put it to use. So what I did was I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube, and that's when I learned that there is a way to use this Immersion Blender. You cannot just randomly stick it in and puree, because if you do that, it's going to create a whole lot of mess and create more work for you instead of saving time. So what you need to make sure is that you have this particular thing as close as possible to the base of the pot or the pan that you're puring in, and very gradually start the puring process. Once you get a hang of it, then you slowly keep on moving around. I never took efforts for that earlier, and that's why I had a lot of splatters, not just on the counters and on my backsplash. I had a lot of splatters coming onto my face and my hand. Thankfully the puree was a little bit on the cooler side, so I did not get burned. But you have to make sure that you are following the right process. It's a good tool when you use it correctly. Moving on to the next one. One of the most used small appliance in my kitchen. Presenting to you my Vitamix blender. This is a classic Vitamix blender jar, 64 ounces tall, and I have had this Vitamix for about 11 or 12 years, I would say. Since then, it has been the most used appliance in my house, especially for wet grinding. For dry grinding, I prefer to use my Cuisinart food processor. But for my wet grinding, I use my Vitamix. I also use my Vitamix to make almond butter and peanut butter now that I have it. Earlier, I used to use my Cuisinart food processor. But since I got my Vitamix, I have been making my almond butter and my peanut butter in this big pot. It's an expensive appliance, and I was worried whether I would really use it to its full potential or not, because a lot of times there are these huge advertisements where they show you can use an appliance for all these things, but in reality we don't really end up using them. So I was a little bit hesitant, but at that time, maybe 10 or 11 years ago, I was totally into drinking green smoothies, and Vitamix was the blender that could process the smoothies without cutting them into smaller pieces. I didn't have to remove the skin for a fruit. I could just put everything directly into this. As long as I made big chunks and put into this, I could use it. I was not trying to juice, mind you guys. I didn't want only the juice. I wanted the juice along with the fiber of the fruits, and I was big time into these green smoothies. And since then, I've been using it not just for making green smoothies. I've been using it to make a lot of my batters for idli, dosa, chilas, or amboli, those kind of things. So it has been very, very useful. There are so many things that I do using this blender. Maybe I should make a video just to show you guys what all I can get done using my Vitamix blender. Right now, the blender that I have is only for wet grinding. I cannot grind dry ingredients. So if I want to grind roasted grains or beans or legumes, I cannot grind in this. I'm thinking of investing in a dry blender jar as well as a small mini jar, so that way I can eliminate all the other appliances that I have been using and just have my Vitamix blender with the wet blender jar, the dry grinder jar, and the mini jar for making different kinds of pastes and chutneys. I think I sound like an infomercial for Vitamix. I cannot even tell you how much I love this, but it was a lot of talking, right? With that said, if you've liked this video and you've got value from this video, do give this video a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for future notifications. Thank you once again. You all have a wonderful day, night, evening, wherever you guys are. Take care.